We admitted that we were human beings and melted for love in this desert. Mahmoud Darwish. Post-colonial love poem. I've been taught bloodstones can cure a snakebite, can stop the bleeding. Most people forgot this when the war ended. The war ended depending on which war you mean. Those we started before those millennia ago and onward, those which started me, which I lost and won, these ever-blooming wounds. I was built by wage. So I wage love and worse, always another campaign to march across a desert night for the cannon flash of your pale skin, settling in a silver lagoon of smoke at your breast. I dismount my dark horse, bend to you there, deliver you the hard pool of all my thirsts. I learned drink in a country of drought. We pleasure to hurt, leave marks the size of stones, each a cabochon polished by our mouths. I, your lapidary wheel turning green, mottled red, the jaspers of our desires. There are wildflowers in my desert which take up to 20 years to bloom. The seeds sleep like geodes beneath hot feldspar sand until a flash flood bolts the arroyo, lifting them in its copper current, opens them with memory. They remember what their God whispered into their ribs. Wake up and ache for your life. Where your hands have been are diamonds on my shoulders, down my back, thighs. I am your culebra. I am in the dirt for you. Your hips are quartz light and dangerous, two rose-horned rams ascending a soft desert wash before the November sky untethers a 100-year flood. The desert returns suddenly to its ancient sea. Arise the wild heliotrope, scorpion weed, blue phacelia, which hold purple the way a throat can hold the shape of any great hand. Great hands is what she called mine. The rain will eventually come or not. Until then, we touch our bodies like wounds. The war never ended and somehow begins again.
The word for drought is different across many languages and lands. The ache of thirst, though, translates to all bodies along the same paths: the tongue, the throat, the kidneys. No matter what language you speak, no matter the color of your skin. We carry the river, its body of water, in our body. I do not mean to imply a visual relationship, such as a native woman on her knees holding a box of Land O'Lakes butter whose label has a picture of a native woman on her knees holding a box of Land O'Lakes butter whose label has a picture of a native woman on her knees. I mean river as a verb, a happening. It is moving within me right now. The body is beyond six senses, is sensual, an ecstatic state of energy always on the verge of praying or entering any river of movement. How can I translate, not in words but in belief, that the river is a body as alive as you or I, that there can be no life without it? Schomburger wrote, "True translation is not a binary affair between two languages, but a triangular affair. The third point of the triangle being what lay behind the words of the original text before it was written. True translation demands a return to the preverbal. We must go back to the place before those 2 points. We must go to the third place, that is the river."
Let me tell you a story about water. Once upon a time, there was us. America's thirst tried to drink us away. And here we still are. These hands, if not God's, haven't they moved like rivers, like glory, like light over the 7 days of your body? And wasn't that good? Them at your hips. Isn't this what God felt when he pressed together the first beloved? Everything, fever, vapor, atman, pulses, finally a sin worth hurting for, a fervor, a sweet, you are mine. It is hard not to have faith in this. From the blue-brown clay of night, these two potters crushed and smoothed you into being, grind, then curve, built your form up, atlas of bone, fields of muscle, one breast a fig tree, the other a nightingale, both morning and evening. Oh, the beautiful making they do of trigger and carve, suffering and stars, aren't they too the carpenters of your small church? Have they not burned on the altar of your belly, eaten the bread of your thighs, broke you to wine, to eager, to nectarious feast? Haven't they riveted your wrists? Haven't they had you at your knees? And when these hands touched your throat, showed you how to take the apple and the rib, how to slip a thumb into your mouth and taste it all. Didn't you sing out their 99 names? Zahir, Aleph, hands times 7, Sphinx, Leonids, Locomotura, Rubidium, August, and September. And when you cried out, oh, Prometheans, didn't they bring fire? These hands, if not God's, then why, when you have come to me, and I have returned you to that from which you came, white mud, mica, mineral, salt, why then do you whisper, oh, my hecatonchire, my centimani, my 100-handed one?
The water we drink, like the air we breathe, is not a part of our body, but is our body. What we do to one, to the body, to the water, we do to the other. Toni Morrison writes, all water has a perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. Back to the body of earth, of flesh, back to the mouth, the throat, back to the womb, back to the heart, to its blood, back to our grief, back, back, back. Will we remember from where we've come? The water. And once remembered, will we return to that first water, and in doing so, return to ourselves, to each other? Do you think the water will forget what we have done, what we continue to do?
The river is my sister. I am its daughter. It is my hands when I drink from it, my own eye when I am weeping, and my desire when I ache like a yucca bell in the night. The river says, open your mouth to me and I will make you more. Because even a river can be lonely, even a river will die of thirst. I am both the river and its vessel. It maps me alluvium, a net of moon-colored fish. I've flashed through it like copper wire. A cottonwood root swelling with drink, I tremble every leaf to lime, every bean to gold, jingle the willow in the same song the river sings. I am it and its mud. I am the body kneeling at the river's edge, letting it drink from me. Yeah, so gracias for letting us share that with you tonight. The video in some ways, so Sarreta and I are going to have a conversation now. And in lieu of introductions and things, Sarreta, as I said earlier, is my partner. She's my wife. She's also a poet. She teaches creative writing at Arizona State University. She's a gardener. She right now is a sculptor, using some of my silicone ice trays for her work. And she's also an expert marksman. She wanted me to add that in. In a lot of ways, the video that we shared with you, it's one of many images, I would say, of our relationship to language, land, art, to one another as well. And I think also in thinking of like the relationship that we share, I'm thinking about, love, friendship, family, what it means to be tune makers in the same spaces. So one of the things that you and I, that Sarreta and I talk a lot about is land, of course, and water. And we also kind of open that up to questions about what is indigeneity. And all of these things that I've mentioned right now, there's a way that we talk about, but also I believe we work toward making these things a practice. Mm-hmm. And so let's just talk about some of those practices that were involved in making the video that we've just showed. You have to look at them because if I keep turning them, they're just gonna look at my ear. Yeah, and again, all of the practices that led up to that. So.
You would like me to speak about?
Yeah, I thought that's a way we could open up the conversation.
Making the video is a really interesting experience. I think it was the first time that we've collaborated on something in that way. And for me, performing is something that I've been doing around water since we moved to Arizona, kind of doing it in secret, not secret, privately. And it was really beautiful to be able to open up that practice to my space of making with Natalie. For me, performance, art in general, maybe is a lot about the places where things meet and watching kind of the specificity of different kinds of encounter. And so performing with water has been just a very connecting experience for me here in the desert. And not just a feeling of being connected, but of looking at kind of the modes of connection, and where there's tension, how I'm being received, how I'm being told to wait in a very material way.
Yeah, and part of showing this, like we're not filmmakers. I'm less experienced with film than Sarreta is. She works in this medium at times. But it was important to me to be able to bring a piece of that project here, and also to have Sarreta here with me. And not just because, some of the work is very much a way of touching her or holding her or sharing some of our relationship, with language and things. But, something that to me feels really lucky about my many relationships as an Indigenous person is that I do have these connections, and that sometimes they're very painful to have, right? To watch your land be diminished or extracted from, or to watch, our river, Hahavil. It is the most endangered river in the United States. But, so sometimes those relationships are painful and heavy. And at the same time, those are the relationships I can turn to right now, in this moment that allows this moment not to be not difficult, but to let it be small enough that I can recognize something larger, that this world and that me in this world is much smaller. And so, for us to be out in the water, because we were going out in the mornings, we were going out in the evenings, and, we think of the river as many things, and one of those things is that it's, you know, you can clean yourself in it. And so to be out in the water, you know, we were getting up really early because it's still very hot here, and going out, and it was just, you know, and not in the cliche way, right, but it was a medicine. It was like, it was a relationship with the self that reminds you of yourself and reminds you of what can be new of yourself. And one of the things we talk a lot about with other people we think with, but that relationship of indigeneity that not only natives have, right? Like Sarreta, your family, it has a, you know, many relationships, but one among those is your relationship to the land in Mariana, Florida. And so we talk a lot about that, about what Sarreta's relationships to her lands and her people's lands, and dislocation and migration, and what those relationships are to me. And when I feel like when we meet there, it's not always smooth. You know, I feel like there are times we diverge, or times neither of us can find the language singly, much less together. But that has been such an important part, even of my being able to continually return to myself, or to a kind of reset that I need.
Yeah. When you said the largeness of water, it reminded me of some time making the video, where you were willing to just let the water be large and everything. And I kept wanting to incorporate the shore and plants, and so, I mean, I guess like feeling like I needed the context around the water as well, where it was really beautiful to me how you were able to just sit in it and let it be its own story. And yeah, like you're saying, my family are farmers in the Florida Panhandle, and there the problem of water is of too much and in the wrong places. And so I mean, I don't know that my family would use this language, but there is something of indigeneity or indigenous relationships to land, that practice of refiguring out those relationships, as land changes, as water changes. How do you stay in kind of reciprocal and respectful relationship to the land that you are taking care of?
Yeah, you mentioned receiving. So the idea of receiving is a really important, I don't know if you can hear that. For some reason, I'm getting news updates on the computer. No, did you muted
The sound.
Are we muted?
No.
Okay. They'll tell us if we're muted. But yeah, you know, we talk a lot about receiving and what that means. And, you know, like you had mentioned in relationship to the river and being received there. And that's something that I think is really important, and something that I want to like open and offer to many people. And I'm lucky I share that with some of you know, other natives and indigenous peoples who I think with and make with. But just that idea that says, you know, some of us began here and some of us have arrived here in ways that were not of our choosing, or in ways of, you know, in ways with a different kind of energy, to flee to a place, or to be forced to a place. And, you know, those are very different kinds of migrations. However, you know, some of the work we're doing now is thinking of, you know, an origin moves naturally into a migration. And what that means is that, you know, yes, it's about receiving. We talk a lot about the fact that, like, you know, the land, you know, we should be good to the land, and we should, you know, that the land receives us. But we're also a part of that land. And there are certain practices of receiving that are very important. And like, for example, that I believe I can receive my river, you know. And I was telling Sarreta, because I got water in my ear recently, and we think of that as like a punishment of sorts, because we're of the river, and why would we have like water in our ear in a painful way? But we say, Ismai Gahai Nikayam, and it's when you first go down to the river, you should welcome yourself, and you give your ear the water, you give your ear the river. And so Ismaik Hanikayam is like, I should have gone, and when I came to the river, I should have, like, we should have had a relationship, and I should have put some in my ears, and kind of, and I didn't. I just jumped right in. And so I had water in my ear for a long time. But I guess the one point I want to make is that in receiving is not. It's not. I mean, it's not a one-way kind of thing. Like, if I'm concerned with receiving, I also have to be very aware, and this is something that you've actually helped me develop language for. But I have to be very aware of how I arrive. And we're kind of far from some of those, the rituals we used to have, right? Like, I was telling Sarreta, I took some kids to Hawaii one time, and, they were going on planes, and their parents had, they were like res family. And so their parents had never been on planes. And when I went to pick them up so that we could drive to the airport, the entire res was out on the streets, and, it was like from a movie, and we were just going, away for a week, and, and they were, their families were weeping, and, and so, and then when we arrived, it was the same thing. You would have thought we we lost the tournament, but you would have thought we won
Came
the
back
world.
with the
Yeah. And so, we think and talk a lot about that relationship. So, and
yeah, I mean, even with, I said that I've been doing performances since I arrived, and when Natalie first took me to the river here, the Colorado River, I didn't get in for a while.
For a long time.
For a couple years, I was really tentative, and it's just been
years. And it's always, it's 122 degrees here sometimes.
Right. So it gets lonely on the beach when you don't get in. But it was through that practice of going by myself and kind of moving around the shore and moving with attention to the trees and the different grasses, and I feel like through that the river gave me a way to come in, and I'm really glad that it happened that way.
You didn't get water in your ear.
I didn't get water in my ear. Yeah, but it was definitely 3.5 years before I got in, with my head, with everything.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a question that I think it's related in this way of the ways that we, the ways we're attentive to how we arrive or how we receive who is arriving, and that both of those things have to be happening. But the question is, how are we finding, or how are you, I don't want to pretend we're speaking as a we, how are you finding personal renewal right now through ritual, practice, relationships, etc.? And that's the $1 million question, right? That's, feel free to jump in too.
Sure.
Just kind of.
Earlier this year, this is a little story. Earlier this year, I did a tarot reading with my my grandmother. She passed away when I was 16, and the takeaway from that reading was, practice what makes you strong. And so that's something I've been trying to build rituals around those things. So part of it, I come from a family of farmers. So part of it is was establishing a garden here, which was very difficult because a family member
did their garden. What's a garden?
Of indigenous plants. So that was another way of figuring out my relationship here. It's 120 degrees in the middle of the summer, and yet I'm putting seeds and my love and my prayers into the ground. And I think, and then also figuring out how to love those things, not just thinking about what I want from them, but figuring out their medicine and what makes them happy. It came to this really beautiful practice of being in the garden at night and playing them music and singing.
Tell them your station that you play for.
Sade Radio. But really the rule of the garden is that I only play music that my mother would turn up to. So. Yeah, and also just a commitment to firearms training and education is something that I think about, especially in the midst of the kind of anti-Black, anti-Indigenous, general racist audacity that's happening in the country right now, and thinking about kind of the like lineages of movements and what we're taught to remember about them and what's left out. And I think firearms was just a jumping point into that question of like what's been erased that gives us power. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a perfect place for firearms, I think. Someone had mentioned that that this reminds them of the words of Bob Marley. You say you love rain, but you use an umbrella to walk under it. You say you love sun, but you seek shelter when it is shining. You say you love wind, but when it comes, you close your windows. So that's why I'm scared when you say you love me. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm taking quite a large leap from that into this, but like where we live it's a, I mean, I think everyone probably feels this way about where they live, but it's a place that I don't want to say it makes you honest because I don't know what honesty, but it's a place where you can't hide, not from yourself, not from the air, which is full of heat and light, not from the weather that you can sense, like if it's going to rain, you can feel it or sense it, even if you can't see it anywhere, or for us to like, the winds that come out of this way I'm pointing is west for us. So that's like toward LA, and east is this way. But, one of the ways we think about not only water and not only land, which are, very, very important kind of geographies and experiences in the book and in some of the things we've been talking about. But I mean, that's also, I mean, in some ways, I wonder if like we're not a kind of technology of those things, or, I've said at times, like, in some ways, I am a pleasure of the earth, that I was made of it. But, we learn from those things. And I think that's what's shifted for me anyway about the pandemic and some of the conditions of COVID is that, it's not even, I don't even think it's about time. Like, it's not like suddenly I have a lot more time, but I think it was enough for me to look with disgust and like disavowal and disallowance of the ways that I have lived in relationship to not having a practice, but just being pushed with momentum and just keeping up. And so in some ways, like I'm thinking like this time spent here in the desert is quiet. It's not easy, but it's quiet. The light, you pay attention to the light. You can tell the time of day or the evening. Like Sarreta's learning the stars, and watching them shift. And for me, that's exciting because that's something that feels very physical to me, is the way our sky shifts through the night. So we were just pointing out Sagittarius, which when we arrived wasn't visible and then suddenly showed up led by Scorpius or Scorpio, and now that's what you saw there last night. Yeah, with the planets. But yeah, and so I don't know, for me, and I think just that attentiveness to the river, it's another language, right? It's not a language I'm trying to speak, but I think it is speaking to me. And then in whatever small ways I can, I try to speak it back out. There's another question. What do you both see as home, and what was your process of building a home together?
What was?
Yeah.
Yeah, home process. I think home is almost like a verb. It's just a constant doing. And I think what makes me feel at home is building something with someone. So that's just in our relationship, but also our larger family. How would you answer that question?
No, I like that. I think that's kind of thinking of it as a verb. Again, like it's a practice, it's a doing.
Right.
It's not just a building, but it's the ways we move in that. It's the ways we,
Yeah. What was your process? Do you think we could be more specific than that? I want to be hopefully more satisfying to the asker of that question.
I mean, I guess the one thing I'll say before like we close is that in terms of you saying it's a verb, and in the Mojave language, nouns and verbs are the same with small variations, often, not always. But I think for me, it like process, it reminds me of the 76ers when they kept saying trust the process, for anyone who knows basketball. Anyway, that didn't work out very well. But I guess what I mean, if I can be brief about this, is that like when you say it's a verb, like the process of building a home, is that it like is there a way for us to stay in that tension and excitement and energy and not having finishedness of the process of building a home?
So I guess to answer your question, like what was our process of building a home together, I think a lot of our home space can fall into this idea of building language together. And like you're saying, like not finishing, ongoing, like we'll be talking and you hit a wall. And so an ongoing commitment to returning to that space and finding the language to move through it is I think our home.
Yeah. And knowing that there's another through, like the through is never through, like you say, like, no, I'm starting to, this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to gather us to enter into our nights. But no, just, I guess what I mean by that is like, we're so used to, because of this country and this nation, we're so used to moving against, right? Like we're so used to pressure. And so we're always looking just for the relief of it. And like, I got through that, like even now, and not that it's not difficult, and not that it's not difficult beyond my imagination, this moment for many people, but it's like, let me get through this. But I guess what I mean is like, the through doesn't have an end, or at least in the way I think it's momentum and emotion. So we've gone beyond time. So I guess I just want to say gracias to you all for sharing this night with us. Gracias, Sarreta. I want to remind you to look at the First Peoples Week programming along with the digital platform, and that's a pretty simple, firstpeoplesweek.org. I'm not sure why I'm doing that with my hand. But yeah, so go there. I mean, it's been an incredible week. Again, mil gracias to the Green Space folks for working this out. And then just to remind you that tomorrow, as a closeout of First Peoples Week, I think next year we're going to just do First Peoples Year. And then that's it, just in preparation for First Peoples Life. So you'll just all be in our lives. But there's an incredible folk musician, Samantha Crane, who's going to be performing an entire set from her home in Oklahoma. And so we're wishing that you all, dream good tonight. We definitely need it. So, yeah. And again, gracias.